You're listening to episode number 92 of the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. Obviously, this is a Monday Q&A episode, and I answer Peter's question. And the reason that I answer his question is because you're going to see something hidden in here when I do. But his question is this: how do you create wealth without hard work? So you've heard me say before that hard work doesn't create wealth and money and abundance. So if you're curious about how to create wealth without hard work, stay tuned. Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached super achievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here. Listen to me for any amount of time or the podcast. I know that you've heard me say that, hard work. We have this cultural myth, this cultural fallacy, and it's not cultural, I suppose it's global, that if we work hard and we put our nose to the grindstone and we hustle and all this, then you know what, we can get ahead in life. Well, that's just not true, and I've talked about that so many different episodes. You've seen people that literally, work 3 jobs and they're working really hard and they're doing manual labor, and yet they don't have any money. Hard work, generally speaking, does not lead to extreme wealth. And let me go back here to Peter's question first, and then I'll dig into it. So Peter wrote in and he said, Bill Gates has repeatedly said that when he was building Microsoft, he worked 7 days a week and often slept in his office. He has attributed his great success to hard work and luck. Now, I don't know if Gates is attributed to that, but Peter says that he has. And then he said Jeff Bezos has said something similar along with Mark Zuckerberg. How do you create this kind of wealth without hard work? Okay, the first answer is I don't know, because there's so many variables here which I'll talk about. But also, at the end of this episode, I'm going to take this entire question about hard work and creating extreme wealth, and I'm going to completely flip it and shift it beyond Peter's question. So, there are so many variables here. Extreme wealth. First off, what is it? 1/1000th of 1% of people create that kind of extreme wealth. I don't know the numbers, but we're talking extreme wealth. What I want to point out here is what wasn't mentioned in Peter's question is also that these people that have created this kind of wealth, like Bezos and Gates and Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and etc., they did something beyond the wealth. And as I understand, they weren't chasing wealth. What they did is they changed the world. They changed the world in a significant way. And as a result, for changing the world in a significant way, they literally got significant reciprocity back from the world, which is extreme wealth. And then a question here I have for Peter or anyone thinking about the hard work is, to what degree did they work hard and for how long? I'm going to dig into that in just a minute. And then Peter said here that Gates attributed his great success to hard work and luck. Well, there is no such thing as luck in the universe that we live in. Life does not randomly bestow upon you, me, or anyone anything that we haven't created, anything that we haven't attracted through our consciousness. It isn't like the universe just rolls a roulette wheel and says, oh, that's number 7 red. Oh, okay, we're going to drop a bag of money on John Smith or Jane Doe. It just doesn't happen that way. We are creators. We create our lives. And I don't, there's so many places I can go here, but you've heard people say that, luck is literally preparation meeting opportunity. It's being prepared, et cetera, et cetera. But really, when you get down to it and the physics of it, there's no chance to it. There is something somewhere in the universe that we have done that's created that what I call synchronicity to create that outcome. So there is no luck, even if Gates said that there was luck. Really, it's actually what's called the law of life, and it's the supreme law, which I'm not going to go into in this episode, but it is the law of synchronicity. And, also where Peter says hard work here is define hard work. This staying at the so Gates said that he stayed at the office 7 days a week. Does working 7 days a week constitute hard work? Does sleeping at the office constitute hard work? The way that I look at it, let's say for example, well, let me keep on going here, guys, and I'm sorry that I'm jumping around here a little bit. Anyway, also, 7 days a week, do long hours constitute hard work? I know people that actually work a lot of hours and they're at work. Let me rephrase that. They don't work a lot of hours. They are at work a lot of hours, yet they do not do any work while they are at work for those long hours. So as you can see, the way that you ask the question, it's very nebulous. But it doesn't matter because at the end of this episode, I want to share a perspective with you about how these people became very wealthy, how I myself make millions of dollars per year, how I attract millions per year, how people that I coach as well attract millions of dollars per year. And it's something that I learned many, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It's something that I learned in a book called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. And I'll share that with you in just a minute. And when I share that with you, and then you look at Gates and Jobs and Zuckerberg and Bezos and all these people, you're going to see in them what I'm going to share with you from the book, The Science of Getting Rich. And it's one line, because all of these people have done something that has created something. And I say that literally in that way. They've created something that has created something for people in the world. And again, I'll share that with you in just a moment. I do want to address also the fact that even if they were at the office for 7 days, 7 days a week or 24 hours a day, or they slept there, I go back to also, well, then how do you define hard work? I would say more so than hard work, they were focused. They were laser focused on the outcomes they wanted to create, and they put the time, attention, and energy into that focus to create the outcomes that they got. And we can look at that and we can say it's hard work, but you know what? That's not hard work. If you look at hard work, I grew up on a farm. I grew up working when I was in my teens. I used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and feed the cattle. I remember my last summer before college, there was another young man. We were the same age. He was going to Texas A&M, and I went to where I went. But we worked together as ranch hands on his dad's ranch. And that summer, his name is Jamie Marek. Jamie and I together, we baled. And if you've ever been on the farm, you're going to know these numbers. But Jamie and I baled 49,000 bales of hay that summer. We baled it. We actually loaded it and stacked it in the barn. And we also got paid a nickel per bale that summer. And this was also in the 100-degree Texas heat. Now, let me share with you hard work. That is hard work. You want to look at hard work, a Navy SEAL. I mean, come on, 90% of people who actually even, go through, you start training, they quit. I mean, that is hard work. What about a lumberjack or an Alaskan, crab fisherman or an oil rig worker? I mean, you guys get the point. That is hard work. Hard work generally is not being in an air-conditioned office 7 days a week, even though you're putting in the hours. Again, that goes back to what I call the focus, the concentration, and the attention. So I really don't want to confuse that with hard work. To give you another example here, you've heard me mention before on the podcast, if you've listened for any amount of time, is I have a home in Sedona, Arizona, and I travel back and forth from there to Dallas, Texas. And fortunately, there is an airline route that's opened up to Flagstaff, which is only 35 minutes from my house, whereas Phoenix is 2 hours. And I used to fly into Phoenix a lot and then drive to Sedona, 2-hour drive. And I remember driving back from my home in Sedona and driving into the airport. It was about 112 degrees in Phoenix. And there were these guys out laying asphalt. And I don't know if that's the right term, laying asphalt, pouring asphalt, whatever. But these guys are out in 112 degree temperature, I mean, just blazing hot Phoenix sun, and they're working. And I looked at those guys and I'm like, you know what? That, that is hard work. So I want to point out, because I like to make every episode a little differently, and especially when I've got a similar topic. I've talked about hard work so many times. I've talked about money here, but it's not about the hard work. Because I just mentioned, many of you probably even listening, you work hard and you're up early and you're working two jobs and they're literally physically demanding jobs. Yet you might not have the money to show for, or wait, you have the money to show for it, but you don't have extreme wealth and you don't have extreme abundance. What I tell people is this, and I have coached a lot of very successful people, everywhere from Wall Street to people that are the number one in their industry, um, CEOs of billion-dollar companies. And it really comes down to this. It's not about the hard work. It's about the money and prosperity consciousness of the person doing the activity. And it's also for entrepreneurs. I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are listening. It's also that you might be putting in the hours and the attention and the focus and the commitment and all that. But then I ask, and I know that I asked in another episode when I talked about the law of attraction and how people use it to repel money, is many people do not value their work. And if you don't value your work, then people are also not going to value your work. What I tell people is this, is people, generally speaking, will value your work to the degree that you value your work and you can deliver. So if you create high value and you have high value on your work, people will value it in a similar way. So let me share with you here about the people that Peter had referenced. He had referenced Mark Zuckerberg, Bezos, and Gates, and of course I mentioned Jobs and Elon Musk. Here's something that a lot of you probably never thought about, is that these people, they were all creators. Now think about that and let that settle in. They were all creators. Now, let me take it a step further than that, which I told you that I would do when I started this episode. This will be a huge takeaway for you guys when you really come to know this. And the common denominator in these people is that they were all creators and they, as a result, created extreme wealth. I mean, what, 80, 90, $100 billion or more. So before I tell you what another common denominator is, very quickly here, let me segue. I had mentioned at the end of the last episode, we're doing a free training on March the 5th, and I gave you some dates and some times. Well, my team informed me that all those dates and times are wrong with the exception of March the 5th. So what I want to share with you is I'm going to be doing a training on March the 5th called the Be to Have series, and we start March the 5th. We'll give you details later, but for now, just, mark your calendar and plan to attend on March the 5th. Dates and times are coming. You can find the link in the show notes and in my bio on Instagram. And show notes are obviously at jimfortin.com, or Instagram is I am Jim Fortin. You can find the registration link there. All right. Now, when I started this episode, I said that I had learned something from the science of getting rich. And what I learned is what I teach my students. And what I learned has also created significant wealth in my life. And it also applies to Gates and Bezos and Zuckerberg and Jobs and the rest. So they were creators. But what they created, are you ready? Is they created expansion on a global level. You see, humans, that's what we want. We want expansion. And to prove that, you're listening to this podcast, and you've been listening for however long you've been listening for one reason and one reason only. You're not listening for me. I know that, and you know that. You're listening to this podcast because you want to pick something up in an episode that is going to create expansion for you, meaning a new perspective at work, or a new perspective on sales or transformation, or your husband or your wife, or whatever it might be. But please notice, you're here for one reason and one reason only. You're here for expansion. And what I want to share with you, and I learned this again in the science of getting rich, when you can create expansion for people, when you can create expansion for people, people will pay you for that expansion. and I look at all the people that have registered and continue to register for my transformational coaching programs. They only do it for one reason. They're not doing it for me. They're doing it for the expansion that they're going to get from the program. So let's go back, like I said, to this podcast. The only reason you're here is because of the expansion in your life that the podcast creates. And if I wasn't creating expansion for you, then you wouldn't come and you wouldn't, download and listen to the podcast. So let that settle in. This is the common denominator with these people. It's not the hard work. They could have put in the hours and the concentration and the focus, but it's the expansion that they created. And even when you look at it as well, back to the question of hard work, and you'd mentioned, these people that you'd mentioned. Well, critical thinking skills, I look at, well, to what degree did they work hard, and did one person work harder than another? Did Gates work harder than Zuckerberg, or Zuckerberg work harder than, Steve Jobs? These are things that we can't answer. But what we can answer is we can look at the common denominator is that they were all creators and they created expansion for people. When I talk about expansion also, is we as human beings, we crave expansion. We crave going to a higher emotional state. Now, if you look at a baby, for example, in its crib, a baby only cries for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's hungry. Secondly, the baby wants its diaper changed. Or third, the baby wants love and affection or to be held. Notice what the baby is wanting. The baby is crying because the baby is wanting expansion. And when the baby gets the expansion, then what happens is the baby stops crying. So let me slow down there and let me just do this. A short episode this week. Your transformational takeaway is that pretty much, not 100%, because nothing in life is 100% except death and taxes. But the reality is if you want to bring wealth into your life, stop thinking about yourself, stop thinking about building your business, stop thinking about what you can get from people, and start thinking about how much expansion can I create in other people's lives. Because like I said, and I'm being a little repetitive, when you can create expansion in other people's lives, people will pay you for that expansion. Okay, so mark your calendar again back to March the 5th, when I'm going to start a live training for you guys. I call it the Be Do Have series. And the next episode, the Wednesday episode, the title of that episode is going to be Why You Have to Break Your Structures to Transform Your Life. And even that, I just didn't put it together till right now. I mean, you're listening to this podcast and, it's called Transform Your Life from the Inside Out. Why? Because you want expansion. And if that doesn't prove to you what I'm sharing with you about what will lead to wealth for you, then you know what? I don't know what will. Okay. Thanks for listening, and do what you can to make it a great day today. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this entire podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with your friends and family. If you found value, they will too. So please share via your social media channels. Also, if you have questions, I'm here to assist. You can email me questions to support@jimfortin.com, and I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. Also, if you want transformational content like this daily, connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Jim Fortin. Finally, I do have a personal request. I believe that we're all here to help others and to grow and evolve ourselves. Together, you and I, let's help more people. If you would please leave a review on iTunes, and a good one, by the way. I'd be grateful, and through your assistance together, we can transform more lives. Thanks for listening.